Any of you guys actually watch the movie Downfall? Like, I'm sure you guys have seen like all the clips and stuff from it. It's pretty funny. If you haven't, here's one right now.
Das war ein Befehl! Der Angriff Steiners war ein Befehl!
Hey guys, welcome back to the Shade Cinema podcast. I'm Chris. As you can see, I'm alone this week.
Gonna cry?
Yes, I'm gonna cry. So, I'm alone this week because we were supposed to do another episode, but one of the guys that I really wanted to be on the show wasn't able to make it to today's episode. So, we are going to do something a bit different. I wanted to do a more solo show. I wanted to really try it out, you know? And this week, it's going to be a bit different. It's not going to be as long. It's going to be edited differently. Trust me, you'll see. Before I actually start, I want to do a brief synopsis on the movie Downfall, because there might be a case where there's a lot of people who come in and they haven't actually seen the movie. So, to give a brief description, Downfall is basically the movie where it's the last 10 days of Hitler's life when he was in his bunker in Nazi Germany, and he was basically going through a mental breakdown because his entire regime was kind of collapsing around him. The people that he trusted and that he admired and loved begin to betray his trust and betray him. The movie is in the perspective of Hitler's personal secretary, who was there in the bunker. Alongside, it uses a lot of other people's memories, like Albert Speer, who was the Minister of Armament, who was very close friends with Hitler at that time, who survived the war and wrote memoirs and whatnot. The movie's actually really interesting. It's a very interesting movie. It's very well shot. It's very well made. I'll get to my thoughts on the movie afterwards. Right now, I'm going to focus more on the points and stuff that the movie tries to make, or specifically the point that I got from the movie. But before we start, I'd like to ask you guys to leave a like, subscribe to the channel. I know it's like the most cliche thing YouTubers do, but it's, you know, you gotta do what you gotta do, right? And I'll tell you why. I won't just tell you why people were devoted to Hitler, but also why people get devoted to totalitarian regimes. When it comes to this movie, I figured out a quote. And tell me if you guys are actually like agree with this quote, is that great leaders are followed to the grave. Now, I'm not here in saying that Hitler was a great leader as in like he was a good man. I'm not saying that. I'm saying like just from a leadership point perspective of how he was able to galvanize the people around him to become essentially like slaves to his plans. It's something that at that point hadn't been done since like the times of Napoleon or the times of Caesar. Like we haven't really seen like that level of deep devotion in a human being before. Here's the thing. Hitler didn't always surround himself with people who were devoted to his cause. He had for a long time had a bunch of people who were often not really giving much of a fuck about National Socialism or didn't really care much about the party goals. But they wanted to, you know, preserve the glory of Germany. They wanted to have the Lebensraum and all that stuff. They were all very bitter after the defeat of Germany in the First World War that essentially landed Hitler his job at the end of it all in 1933. Because in 1918, Hitler, being a soldier, was devastated at the loss of Germany in the First World War. He was shocked. He was in awe. How could the superior Germans lose out to the British and the French? Although they were, you know, he saw them as powerful as well. He didn't think they would beat Germany. Could they actually beat Germany? He didn't believe so. He thought that there was a stab in the back. There was that myth going around everywhere that the Germans weren't actually beaten in the field, that they were beaten because of some sort of treachery behind the scenes. And he pinned that on the Jews and the communists. He pinned that on other people who were, albeit some, like the communists, somewhat were involved in the downfall of Germany. At that point in time in 1918, the Germans were thoroughly beaten in the field. But that obviously goes against the narrative, so he didn't want to push something like that. So instead, Hitler came to power with the whole idea of the stab in the back and bringing Germany back to the times where they were great. Now, Hitler took power in 1933. He had about 12 years of time until he was able to fully indoctrinate the nation, until he was fully able to mold the nation into what it eventually becomes, which is this essentially a hardliner state for the Nazi government. By the time of 1945, that pretty much the whole country had been indoctrinated in his belief. The only people who weren't were the people who were old enough to remember what the world was like in 1918 or before that, before Hitler actually took control. You can see a lot of that indoctrination seeping through. You see a lot of generals who, even though they completely disagree with what Hitler is saying and doing in terms of moving troops around that don't really exist anymore, that are just armies on paper, or ordering suicidal attacks against Soviet armies that would get completely crushed and repelled, and that believing that the people who don't succeed in those plans are somehow cowards and traitors to the nation, that people who run away from fighting because it's pointless to try to attack an entrenched enemy with machine guns and anti-tank guns and tanks themselves. It's pointless to attack an army like that when you don't have anything, you don't have the experienced troops or anything like that. Like, that's crazy. Like why? Like, they thought that was insane. Like, why? How could Hitler think that for 2 seconds that armies that were essentially on the verge of destruction could ever attack armies that were battle hardened and ready to fight at any moment's notice, at any point in time? The Germans could never match up to what the Soviets were doing. Never. But yet they were still competing like that. Hitler was still trying to win the war, even though at that point it was unwinnable. So the whole German high command at that point in time were full of yes men, because Hitler had dismissed all the ones who called him fucking crazy, who were disagreeing with him. That led to a lot of problems because the generals around him were all incompetent, and they were all just fanatics as much as he was. And there's actually a really interesting contrast between the generals that are in the bunker and then the generals that are actually in the field. I'm going to use two different pairs of generals, okay? Number one are Krebs and Bergdorf. Those are the two guys that are, in that famous scene, right? And then there's Weidling and Monke. Krebs and Bergdorf are like incredibly clean. Like, their uniforms they're like nicely ironed out. They're nicely clean. They're nicely presented out. Like, their medals are nice and shiny. But then when you look at Monke and you look at Weidling, they're all like dirty. They're very dirty because they're in the heat of battle. They're actually on the front lines fighting against the Soviets. They're much more realistic about the prospects of victory or not. Especially Weidling is like, this is kind of pointless. Like, I don't think, like, there's a point where they're like, well, I hope Steiner can attack. Do you think Steiner can attack? He's like, I don't think Steiner can do anything, but you probably know that as much as I do. And Monke, although he's in the battle, in the heat of battle, as much as Weidling is, he's an SS general, so he's more fanatical than Weidling, who's just a regular Wehrmacht general. The SS, for those who don't know, were basically originally Hitler's bodyguard unit, but then they eventually metamorphosized into the people who committed the Holocaust, and then also a small part of the army was the SS, the Waffen-SS, which was like the armed version of the SS. This is important because if you look at a lot of the soldiers, they were wearing the SS runes on their shirts, and that means basically that they're a part of the SS. Another contrast you can actually see is that the people in the bunker are kind of like living a good life. Like, they still have food, they still have water, they still have electricity. They're partying. The motherfuckers are drinking. Like, almost in half the scenes that the generals in the bunker are in, they're pissed drunk because they have nothing else to do. They're drinking, they're smoking. The reality in the bunker is almost completely different from the reality in the field. It's actually a completely different world almost. They feel like the same impacts, except that for the ones in the field, it's much more real. The people in the field, it's like a war zone. There's just artillery everywhere. People are dying left, right, and center. There's even like a point where they literally, like, on Hitler's birthday, Eva Braun, who eventually became Hitler's wife, one day before they actually committed suicide together, wanted to have a dance like in the chancellery, which was the building right above the bunker. What was funny about that is she's like, I want to dance. And she's like the only one that's like super enthusiastic about it. Everyone is kind of like nervous, like, yeah, like this is fun and all, but we might die soon. And then like people start having panic attacks and shit because like, oh man, like holy shit, we're gonna fucking die. We're gonna fucking die. That's what they think. That's what they actually fucking think. They think that they're gonna die at any fucking moment in time. Then while all the music is playing, there's artillery going on. At one point, the artillery scratches the record. Like the record stops because the artillery hit nearby, and it didn't really hit the mark, but it hit nearby. The record gets scratched. So instead of her saying, "Okay, guys, let's go back down," she's like, "I want to dance. I want to dance. I want to dance." And she keeps dancing, and there's like a piano. Someone who knows how to play piano starts playing piano, starts playing swing, and then an artillery shell lands right next to the chancellery and blows the windows out completely, and all the shattered glass hits through the fucking crowd of people dancing and stuff. And they all start running away because obviously, you know, at that point the party's over. She's not gonna be like, all right, fuck it, let's dance, let's continue dancing. You know, that would be mental. Again, she probably was mental. And another point I want to make is there was another scene with Ava Brown. Now this is not, she's not as crazy she's still a bit crazy, but it's not as like wacky of her. Like she doesn't necessarily have a direct implication. Ava Brown is writing a letter to her sister. She's writing about like all the jewelry she has, and like she has to go pick up the jewelry, and because I'm not gonna make it out of the bunker, but here's a bunch of jewelry that I have. Like I'll tell you where they are. She's talking about like how she had a topaz bracelet and she wanted to give the topaz bracelet to her sister, and then she was talking about like, well, I have a diamond watch, but it's currently getting repaired, so like I'll send you the address and you'll pick it up afterwards. Like as if, you know, the Soviets aren't gonna be like, oh wow, a diamond watch, it's broken, I don't care, and they're gonna fucking steal it. Or a German civilian might steal it just to survive. They might sell it for bread. And then at the same time, while she's typing away at this letter, like it's not a useless scene. She's typing away at this letter. There's people dying in the streets. There's people dying in the streets during war. Like it's cutting away. It's just her narrating her letter, and then there's people dying in the streets. There's a part earlier in the movie which I'll actually also discuss now. One of the main characters in the movie is called Peter Krantz. Now Peter Krantz destroyed 2 panzers, got a medal, met Hitler and all that. One of the people that were with Peter when his father confronted him about the fact that he was, you know, why is he going to war? He's like 12, 14 years old. There were 2 people there. There was one that was like a young officer. He looked like maybe 17, 18 years old. And there was a girl there who was probably around that same age. And they were telling about how we're devoted to the Fuhrer. We're going to fight to the last man. And then in that scene, the 17-year-old officer shoots the girl because like the girl was telling her, shoot me. I don't want to be captured by the Soviets. So she gets shot, and then he feels so much distress that he shoots himself in the head as well. And that I always found to be a very brutal scene in my opinion. And it really shows the level of devotion that these people had and the delusion that they've had in all of this. The point being that the people who were devoted to Hitler were also delusional about their prospects of victory, because Hitler convinced them that like the victory was coming and it was on its way, and he's der Führer. Why would he ever lie? There's a part where Fegelein, who's one of the guys in the earlier scenes, he says like when one of the women asked him like why would he lie? They're like, there's no point for him to lie, and he's like, what does he have to lose? He doesn't have anything to lose anymore. Yeah, he's already lost pretty much everything. The land he conquered has been conquered. His lands are being invaded. A bunch of his friends are leaving him. He doesn't really have anything left after that. The devotion to Hitler specifically. Now we're gonna shift to the devotion part. The devotion to Hitler was so great that people were kind of like walking around with the same fantasy land kind of idea. They all knew that the war was ending, but they were still hoping that one final thing can reach the ultimate victory. They can do one final decisive act that can somehow end the conflict. Just one decisive act is going to somehow destroy the whole Red Army. Like, oh, damn, we lost 20,000 soldiers in this one battle. Okay, let's retreat our whole 7 million strong army. The devotion to Hitler, even despite all of the tremendous losses and despite all the lies about the fact that like Wunderwaffe or wonder weapons were going to show up to help the Germans win the victory, that none of that stuff actually materialized, despite none of those things actually coming to fruition, they still deeply, deeply respected him and deeply, deeply followed him and wanted to fight to the last man, no matter what. They still wanted to fight and die for him even after he died. There's even a point where Hitler flat out lies to his new Air Force deputies and tells them, like, this is all a plan. I planned for all of them, all the Soviets to pull up to Germany, to pull up to Berlin. I have hundreds of thousands of new, fresh troops, fresh, experienced, battle-hardened troops. I have thousands of new jets that are on your disposal. And instead of being like, okay, if you had all this shit, why don't you just defend the Reich? Why don't you send them to the front and help them out? Or if we had all these jets, then what the fuck are we waiting for? What are we waiting for? Just some big decisive blow that's not going to show up? But instead of asking that, which is the obvious thing to ask, the new German deputies, they were like, wow, I can't believe we had so many reserves. And they're like, I bask in your genius, mein Führer. Like, it's the funniest scene. I'm like, what goes through your head to think that this guy who clearly fucking lied to you has any intention to tell you the truth in this moment? He's telling you like no, this is entirely a decoy operation. Like, what? Decoy operation? Like, what? Like, what the fuck are you saying? It's like Hitler wanted he wanted the Soviet Union to pull up to Berlin, and then he was gonna
It's me, Austin! Oh, son of a bitch!
He was gonna pull up to Germany and like get like bamboos, like, psych bitch, and then he's gonna like envelop 7 million soldiers in one shot. Knowing the Russians, they probably had like another 14 million in the back, but I mean, it would have been much more efficient if all those soldiers were, I don't know, invading the Soviet Union alongside. Just saying. Also, the main character seems to be in some way like devoted to Hitler as well. She knows that she's in a precarious situation. She knows that she is about to die. She knows that if she stays in that bunker, she might very well not live much longer than the next 2-3 weeks. But she stays with him anyways. She stays with him because, and then when it's explained to her, she's like, I don't know why I decided to stay. It's like they were all in like some sort of trance. It's like they were all like mentally manipulated to play a part in Hitler's game. So a big question would be then, why do people devote themselves to ambitious, charismatic, and sometimes evil men? And I think that's an important question to ask. Realistically, there's many different reasons. Not just one, but there's many different reasons. Number one, it's a lot of people want other people to solve their own problems. Let's say the economy sucks. Let's say the roads are bad. Let's say the healthcare is dog shit. Who do we turn to? The government. Because they're the ones that are in control of those things. So when something goes bad, we go like, hey, Mr. President, can you fix this? Or hey, mein Führer, can you fix this? In the case of Germany. And oftentimes when you fix those problems, the people will kind of come into your own debt. And they'll respect you for those things. Like, yeah, you know, he's a bit of an asshole and he's a totalitarian and he says horrible things about other people, but hey, the gas is cheap. Hey, the rent is cheap. Hey, I can buy food. You know, having a totalitarian in power to them is better than starving, which was probably the case for a lot of Germans. A loaf of bread cost tons and tons of money. Literally tons of money. Another reason that's less common to talk about is that the fact that people want order, that people want to be a part of something greater as well. Another reason that's less talked about, Jordan Peterson talks about this, and he mentioned how people have a desire for order, especially people like Germans who weren't really used to democracy since it was like brand new in Germany at the time. So I think people naturally want to become a part of a movement, and with the whole banners and flag waving and all the cool shit like that, the uniformity and the marching and the drums playing in the backgrounds. Oof, that hits you right in your fucking core. And a lot of totalitarian states specifically, they cater greatly to the whole idea of building a movement. The whole communist thing is a movement. They definitely do stuff like this. Like if you look at the Soviet Union, they did a lot of banner waving and the flags, and you see a lot of famous videos of people marching, and they're holding pictures of Stalin, like as if he's like they're venerating a god almost. In the same way as like North Korea does to this day, there's still like the marching and the uniformity, and like it's like almost the whole country is a part of like this one big group, and it bolsters the national identity greatly. And the Nazis use this effectively. The whole Nuremberg rallies with tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of people showing up, and they're all in uniform, and like there's big Nazi banners everywhere, and then Hitler shows up and gives a rousing speech at the Nuremberg, and everyone goes Heil and all that shit. People want to be a part of that shit. People really, really, really want to be a part of that. And the Nazis, especially, and the Soviets, both especially, mastered this. Though Stalin wasn't as great of a public speaker as Hitler was, he was still able to capture the devotion mainly through fear. Then Hitler, there was definitely elements of fear, but I think it was less fear than Stalin. Hitler had the charisma to really galvanize people to his cause. Stalin didn't really have the charisma as much as Hitler did, although he was still an incredibly, incredibly iconic figure for his time. Also, another reason is that the more people follow something, which this kind of goes well in hand with the movement thing, but the more people follow something and believe something, the more other people will believe in that thing as well. Because it's the whole mob mentality. You have to realize that although you are, I'm very sure of, an incredibly intelligent individual, a lot of people aren't. A lot of people have like 100 IQ or something like that, and they just go with the flow. A lot of people are ready, willing, and able to just be like, yeah, I don't give a fuck. I don't care what the fuck they said. They lowered my taxes, or they paved new roads that are better, or they deflated the currency. The currency has more value now. It has value. I can buy food. They don't give a fuck about all the underlying problems. Like, you can have all that, but with less totalitarianism. But they don't see it that way. They're like, oh, well, they brought it, so they're the only ones who can do it. So,
fuck.
We're kind of screwed in that sense. But here's an interesting question. Why are people devoted specifically to Hitler? Like, obviously, there's all of these things, right? The order, the banner waving, the fact that he solved a lot of problems, and the fact that, a lot of people got into it and they bought into the hype. But it's not just that. Hitler brought back something to the Germans that they were missing for like a solid 15 years. He brought back pride in Germany. The number one thing that Germany lost in World War I was not land, was not money, was not men. It wasn't children who died during the turnip winter, who starved to death because there wasn't enough food. The pride in the nation, the fact that the nation, which was the most powerful nation in Europe at the time, besides Russia, was defeated in a war. They could not believe that. A war that they have spent so much, all the things I mentioned, blood, money, land, people, men, women, and children who all died because of the war, was for nothing. They didn't even win. So when you don't win, that's a huge blow to your national pride. That's a huge blow to your ego. So the Germans got fucking salty, as they do, as losing parties often do. They got salty. They believed in the whole stab in the back myth. People moved to the political extremes, and it just so happened to be that Hitler was the one who was in the right place at the right time, and he was the right voice to do it. That's why people were devoted specifically to him. Not to the party. People didn't like the party. Not to Goebbels, not to Himmler, not to Goering. Maybe a bit Goering. They liked Goering probably because he was a World War I pilot. But Hitler specifically, because it wasn't them who made Germany great. It wasn't Himmler, Goebbels, Goering, or fucking Dönitz. It was Hitler. Hitler made Germany great. They will be loyal to the Fuhrer. Not to the party. They don't give a fuck about the party. They did everything for Hitler. If you want proof of this, if you want proof of the devotion of Hitler, there's that one scene at near the end, once Gunsch's group gets the surrender notice. Like they get hey, we surrendered, it's fine, you can stop fighting now. The very devoted German SS soldier, the one who was very young and very kind of down to the rules. He was wearing an armband. Obviously. But he was wearing an armband on his sleeve. And he was a part of the Leibsteindater Adolf Hitler. Which was basically like, it was literally Hitler's bodyguard unit. But then it turned into like a military unit during the war. And it was saying, it said Adolf Hitler on the cuff of his shirt. That's how devoted they were. It didn't say the Nazi party. It said Adolf Hitler, specifically him. Hitler is the reason why the Nazi party got to success. And they were so devoted to him that they were willing to die for him even after he had died. In that same scene, that same German soldier says that we are SS, we cannot outlive the Fuhrer. Like as if there's some sort of like Bushido samurai thing. The devotion was also so great. Magda Goebbels, who was Joseph Goebbels' wife, Joseph Goebbels being the minister of propaganda for the Nazi party, which tells you he was probably a very busy man, brings her children to the Fuhrer bunker, which is the bunker that Hitler lives in, and the story doesn't end well for those kids. If you want to know more, watch the movie. It's a great movie. I'll touch upon the movie in a little bit. I guess the lesson here is, how can we evade totalitarian regimes? How can we evade the pull and the attraction of totalitarian regimes? Because I'm not going to lie, there's a great deal of like presence and presentation to the way the Nazis did their rallies. It's encapsulating. When you watch it, you can't help but feel encapsulated by it. I'm like, wow, this is actually very impressive. That, they pulled everything like this off. I'm like, it's impressive to me, but I'm like, yeah, but they were fucking evil. That's the thing. You have to have enough of a brain to be like, yeah, but they were fucking evil. That's the problem. There's a lot of people who don't think that way. They just think, well, they were very impressive, and they kind of stop there, and they believe everything that they say. I guess the way people can evade totalitarian devotion is living in a society where there's enough checks and balances, where totalitarianism isn't really something that can take root very easily. We're living in very dangerous times right now. The governments of the world, especially in the West, are getting more and more centralized. And that can lead to totalitarian problems down the future. Wars are going on nowadays where it's not even declared wars, they're just military operations. It's just another word for war. I think the way people can evade totalitarian regimes is by watching movies about people who lived through totalitarian regimes, who lived in an everlasting fear of the government, of government reprisals, of what happens if you disobey what the government tells you to do. But realistically, if you think about it, if you disobey the government now, you already do get fucked. What happens if you don't pay your taxes? You go to fucking prison. I think the way people can avoid the trappings of totalitarian regimes is to join groups and communities that kind of have that general feel. It's difficult for me to fall for it because I grew up around a community where we did all the flag raising and we did all the uniformities. For those who don't know, I'm a scout. Right now I'm a scout leader, and I've gone through 10 years of that, 10 years plus, 15 solid years of flag raisings and wearing uniforms and marching down the street and marching on sync and all that. I've done that shit already. And it wasn't like for any political reason. It was just because I'm a scout and that's what we do. I don't think a lot of people have that. I think a lot of people kind of live in their own bubbles, expecting something to come to them. And then when it comes to them, they're ready to accept it. And that's what happens with the Nazis. That a lot of the Germans, I guess, this is my opinion, felt like they were out of place. Like they were kind of left to die. And the Nazis came and lent them a hand. Even though that hand led to destruction, it was still a hand. And a hand that might lead to destruction is probably better than no hand at all. So I think people need the community-based organization that organizations like Scouts provide. But the thing is, if you replace that with like government parties, and you can't be a part of a community that's like political in any way. By political, I mean like in the sense of like it tells you to vote for a certain party, or it tells you to vote for certain individuals, or it actively promotes stuff from one side of the political spectrum in comparison to another. Politics entirely should be taken out of those things, and that's how you have healthy community-based organizations. So join the local community, even if it's just church. Do that, and honestly, I think it will make you a happier person. You're going to meet a lot of really good people. And I've met a lot of really good people from Scouts. So just saying that. Going on my thoughts on the film, actually, this is going to surprise a lot of people. But this is, honest to God, probably one of my favorite movies ever made. Like, top 3 favorite movies is this and like 2 other movies. Right now, off the top of my head, I can't really think of a few others. I can think of Hacksaw Ridge, who's very, very, very good. I love that story so much. It's the perseverance. Anyways, I love the acting in this movie, in the Downfall. Bruno Ganz does a phenomenal job as Adolf Hitler. All the actors pull out all the stops to act great in the movie. The ones who have to sound crazy. Somehow they manage to make Hitler somewhat human. Like they somehow managed to make Hitler like someone who you can look at and be like, wow, like this is not just some monster. He's like a person. I think that's the scariest part about Hitler. It's not the fact that he killed 6 million Jews. It's not the fact that he started pretty much a war by himself. It's the fact that he was a human being. That's what's the scariest part about Hitler. He's a human just like you or me. And he was able to galvanize an entire nation's worth of individuals to follow an evil regime that led to 6 million deaths, that they were happy to do, that a lot of those men were happy to commit those murders. And that's a sad reality. But with enough introspection, with enough realization that if you were probably in Hitler's shoes and you lived his experiences and you lived the life that he lived and you believed everything he believed, you probably would have done the same thing as well. And maybe so would have I. But you're in your body and I'm in mine. And all we can do is control our actions and control the way we think. And I guess that's the beauty of humanity. So if you like that video, leave a like, subscribe to the channel, ring the bell for all notifications. If you want to listen to me on Spotify, the link is in the description below. If you also want to listen to me on Anchor, the link is also in the description below. Next week, there won't be any episodes. There might be clips, but there won't be anything new coming out. I'm going to take a week off. The following week, it's going to be a pretty special episode. We've been waiting to do this one for a while. And yeah, we'll still upload clips. One of the clips got like close to 2,000 views. It's pretty cool. At the time of this recording, I think it has like 1.8 thousand views. It's pretty cool. We're at like 30 subscribers. It's growing slowly. But yeah, leave a like, subscribe to the channel, turn the bell for all notifications. Follow me on Instagram if you want to. I post stories about teasers about the show and all that. And yeah, it should be a really fun time. I guess I'll see you guys in 2 weeks. Auf Wiedersehen.